The brain itself, meaning the brain tissue, does not have any sensory neurons. What do I mean by that? Well, if I touch the top of my hand, I can feel that. If I want to sense my heartbeat, if I work at it, I can feel that. If I want to sense how I feel internally at the level of my stomach, is it full, is it empty, am I hungry, is it acidic, does it ache, or does it feel pleasant, etc., I can sense that. And that's because we have sensory neurons on our skin and in our body, etc. We also have sensory neurons in our eyes that let us perceive things externally. We have no sensory neurons on our brain.
Welcome to the Mindset by Design podcast with your host and NLP expert, Andy Murphy, where you will learn the tips, tricks, and strategies he teaches his world-class clients to give you the skills to dominate any business.
What's going on, Mindset by Design crew, and welcome to episode 418. Hope you're amazing as always and life is treating you, well, I hope it's treating you pretty damn awesome. But I do know that some of you listening to this are not in a good place. So many of the audience is, and you might have been, but right now, right here, listening to this, maybe you're not. Maybe there's overwhelm, there's stress, the pressure's kicking in. You know, you're probably running your own business. Maybe you're in sales. Maybe you're running e-commerce or SaaS business. Maybe you're just a founder of something. Or you're just a normal person wanting to even get into this crazy space of being an entrepreneur. But what does that really mean, you know? And we're going to get into all of that. That's all awesome things. And what I'm here to tell you, right? What I'm here to tell you is a few different things. And the first thing I'm here to say to you is everything's going to be all right. It's going to be all right, right? We're going to get into the science today. It's a great episode. It's a great clip from Andrew Huberman. I break down. It's all about the science of meditation and the neuroscience around meditation. So I can talk about the chemicals and the brain and everything a little bit later. But first of all, I just want to talk to you. And you might have started a course, you might be way deep into a system already. Let's just talk to you first of all, if you're a new entrepreneur. And you might have started all hyped up. Right? Bought the course, this is going to be the ultimate thing that's going to change my life. And then it starts that way, doesn't it? You get all excited, you're all pumped up, you're motivated, you're disciplined, your belief is full. You're valuing your time. You're telling everybody around you what you're going to do. And then you get into the course and it's awesome for a while. Then it gets really complicated. Sound familiar? Then you notice that, you need a lot more resources than what you were sold. Right? Is this sounding familiar for some of you? And then what happens is you get stopped, or you start distracting yourself. You start making excuses. You start wavering on that belief that you can even do this. And then suddenly what you were doing for 6 hours a day moves to 2 hours a day, and then you skip a day, and then you get where I'm going, right? And understand this. I don't know the course that you're learning, but probably the course is really good. But it's really good for the right person. And the right person means that they have trained their brain to respond how they want it to. What does that mean? It's like an athlete, right? You can have all the skill set in the world, but if you can't perform on game day, then the challenge is, you're not going to be able to be at a world-class level. And it's the same with business. For some weird reason, if people think about mindset, and I use that term very broadly these days because I know it's the name of the podcast, they get it, but I've had the podcast a long, long time. People really don't know what mindset is. And they don't know the science behind it, but especially in business, people think it's all about skill set. It's not just about skill set. You could have the best skill set in the world, but it doesn't mean you're going to be successful. It really doesn't. This is the little dirty little secret that keeps people coming back to buy more marketing courses or sales courses, because you're constantly feeling like you're not good enough. And this is a dirty little marketing secret I'm letting you into now. So first of all, be kind on yourself. But if you understand you need to treat yourself like a professional athlete, athletes. And what that means is professional athletes train their brain. As much as they do the external work, they do the internal work, because that's the journey, that's the secret sauce, that's what makes you win. And it's not just about thinking positive, it's about training your brain and your nervous system to make you behave as you want it to under the pressure. So you keep the discipline, you keep the focus, you keep the belief, you keep that passion, you keep that enthusiasm, you laterally think so you can solve problems, you become creative, you get the ideas, right? All of that doesn't come from this skill set that you're learning on the outside. Does that make sense? So when you understand that, everything changes, and it really does. And I want you to keep that belief and that focus. And I'm here to help you. The other thing is, you might be deep, right? This is number 2. You might be deep into your business right now. You could even be doing $500,000, $1 million, $10 million a year. Doesn't matter. All top performers, doesn't matter if you're in sales, if you're selling for your own system, you're selling somebody else's. It's the same thing, man. After 21 years of looking in thousands of brands and some of the best in the world, right? I want to give to you a little understanding, right? And remember, I was a top performer in 2 different countries in investment real estate sales. And back in the day, before I worked out this thing, and this thing is that all top performers can't maintain that constantly, every single day for years and years. It's impossible. It's near impossible, I should say, right? Nothing's impossible. But what that means is we all felt what it feels like to have that beautiful, like, it's like a bubble, right? And you just, everything's easy. Everything's flowing. It's just, you're closing the clients, you're just kicking ass with the business, that you're handling the pressure, and then suddenly, what happens, man, right? Suddenly that bubble goes pop, and then your focus changes, your belief changes, your discipline changes, you doubt yourself, and then suddenly that neurology, that brain muscle starts to pump and build in a different way, and then suddenly that mind muscle that we're talking about, it starts to focus and build on your lack. And what happens is it becomes like a nightmare to switch back on. It becomes a nightmare. Why? Because there's so much pressure, external pressure. Maybe it's a lifestyle, bills, maybe it's responsibility for your team, your family. Whatever it is, that pressure is really heavy, which only puts your nervous system into a fear response or a reactive response, right? Which means it becomes near impossible to switch back on. Does this sound familiar to you? Yeah, it sounds, yeah, you get it, right? And it doesn't really matter what game you're playing. It doesn't really matter what level of the game you're playing, from being worth 100 million down to being worth $50, right? We all want the next level. We all want that next level. And we've all had experiences, especially at the start of everything's brilliant. You're just excited, pumped up. But when that bubble pops, right, as I say, it becomes a nightmare. And so I just want to give you the confidence that there is way out of this. And I'm not pitching the reboot protocol today. I'm not. You're going to know if you resonated with either of those things. You're going to know that you can go on andymurphy.online and go to apply, and you can just fill the application form, and I can fix you in many different ways, whether it's the mastermind, the VIP, whether it's working with me for a day, 2 days, 90 days, or 12 months. I can reboot you and expand you into blue oceans real fast. Doesn't matter what level you're at. But the reason I say this to you today is I just want you to have faith, confidence. And sometimes we have to take a step back and relax, man, right? To find that fire again. And if you're in either of those situations right now, then I hope this helps today's episode. I hope this episode helps you, because we're talking about meditation. And if you're not meditating, come on. You go, I'll do my own version of it, Andy. I get it. And keep doing those things if it's working for you. But I just want you today to jump in, really, like, this is why I love Huberman, right? Because he is breaking a lot of the, I don't know, it's the cultural explanation for a lot of things in personal development. And to be honest, most people in personal development are full of shit. The coaches suck. They just think they're good. They're just hurting people left, right, and center. They become very good marketers. But I'm very different to that. After 21 years of doing this, I see kind of the matrix, Once you've looked into the eyes of billionaires and you looked into the eyes of startups, you looked into the eyes of traders, Amazon sellers, e-commerce owners, world champion athletes, even trauma victims. Once you've looked into the brains and eyes of all of these people, there's very specific commonalities that you need to fine tune to be able to get the same result, right? And meditation is a few different things, and I'm not going to go into it too much. I'll probably just let you all know the little secret sources when I'm in the episode, but it is really, really about yes, calming the mind, but what the heck is a mind, right? This is the difference, right? Mind, what is a mind? We're going to get into it. So it's really about calming your nervous system, your brain, and so you can think differently. And that's the point, right? Life is about perspective. And if you're in the wrong perspective, then the world looks a very certain way. That could be negative, positive, good, bad, whatever it is. But life is about perspective. So if we can change your perspective, then we change how you experience the world. And one of the tools to this is definitely meditation. Okay? So we're going to get into this. Sound good? Awesome, let's jump into it. Just before we do, make sure you're heading over to where? You got it, andymurphy.online. Very simple. Grab what? Grab your free ebook right now. It's valued at $27. I'm going to be putting on Amazon soon. And that is your Total Mind Control Handbook. Get into it. Second, go and check out the 8-Figure Thinker or the Genius Trader. If you want to really deep dive and bulletproof yourself, then the Genius Trader is for you if you're in Forex stocks or high level, low level, whatever it is. That is a must. The other thing is, if you want to nerd out and train yourself to be absolutely at the highest level, then the 8-Figure Thinker University is for you. It's immense. It's got full certifications in it. It's built around NLP, neuroscience, behavioral psychology. It's fully gamified. We're going to drop you into your unconscious mind. We're going to take you on this massive journey like there's nothing else out there that even compares. And I guarantee that. And so go and check that out. What else? That's it. And the other thing is, if you really want to reboot right now, if you just feel like you're in expansion or you need to reset and find that reignition inside you, that fire again, then that's what I do at the highest level. And I want to be able to help you. Got all different price points, all different ways to do it. So yeah. Come and have a chat. Head over to andymurphy.online, work with me, fill the application form in, and I would love to chat to you very, very soon. Sound good? Awesome. Let's jump in. Go and hang out with Andrew Huberman, and I'll see you at the end of the show.
Want to sense how I feel internally at the level of my stomach. Is it full? Is it empty? Am I hungry? Is it acidic? Does it ache or does it feel pleasant, etc.? I can sense that. And that's because we have sensory neurons on our skin and in our body, etc. We also have sensory neurons in our eyes that let us perceive things externally. We have no sensory neurons on our brain. This is one of the reasons why you can remove the skull and do brain surgery on somebody who's wide awake and be poking around in there, and they don't need any anesthetic. So you have a brain, of course, and on both sides of your brain, you tend to have mirror symmetric representations of the same things. What do I mean by that? Well, you have a prefrontal cortex on the right, you have a prefrontal cortex on the left, and they actually do slightly different things. Language is sometimes lateralized to one side, but in general, For every structure that you have on one side of the brain, you have the same structure on the opposite side of the brain. There's one clear exception to that, and that's the pineal gland. The pineal gland is the gland that makes melatonin, which at night, when it gets dark, secretes melatonin, and that melatonin makes you sleepy, helps you fall asleep but not stay asleep. Descartes, right, the philosopher Descartes, asserted that the pineal was the seat of the soul because it was the one structure in the brain that he saw was not on both sides of the brain. It was only one of them and in the middle. Now, I don't know if it's the seat of the soul or not. I'm not in a position to make assessments like that. But what do we know about the pineal? The pineal, as I mentioned, is involved in releasing melatonin. It does a few other things as well. But it is also considered the third eye for a couple of reasons. One is that it responds to light, although in humans, not directly. So in birds and lizards and snakes, they actually either have a thin skull or, believe it or not, 2 holes in the top of their skull that allow light to go directly in. If you look at the head of a snake, light can go directly into their brain through these holes and activate the pineal to suppress melatonin and control their wakefulness, sleep rhythms. In birds, they don't have holes in their skull, but they have very thin skulls. And believe it or not, light can penetrate the thinness of the skull in many birds and communicates information about time of day and even time of year. And that's translated into hormonal signals such as melatonin release from the pineal. And so the pineal has been called the third eye because it's a light sensitive organ inside the brain. In humans, the pineal sits deep, deep, deep to the surface and light cannot get in there. In fact, if light can get into your brain, unless you are part of a specific experiment where that's the intention, or you're having neurosurgery or something of that sort, then you've got serious issues happening. That pineal sits deep, deep, deep near what's called the fourth ventricle, and it absolutely should not see light directly. So the idea that the pineal is the third eye in humans is not true. It just isn't true. So anytime someone says, oh, the pineal is your third eye, that's not the third eye center that people are referring to when they talk about meditation. Now, you'll see a number of different forms of art where somebody will, it'll be a picture of a face and the eyes will be closed, or sometimes open. There'll be literally a third eye, like a cyclops eye in the middle of the forehead. That has been proposed for many thousands of years to be, quote unquote, the seat of our consciousness. Now that's interesting because that real estate behind the forehead actually turns out to be the prefrontal cortex, which we know from lesion studies and stimulation studies. If you remove that brain area, people become very reflexive. They are not thinking intentionally. They don't become deliberate. In fact, and this is kind of an eerie result, but if you inactivate, you turn off the prefrontal cortex and you give somebody the opportunity to play a shooting game, for instance, their accuracy goes through the roof. They become essentially like a machine. They see a stimulus, they shoot at it. They see a stimulus, they shoot at it. Their accuracy is exceptional, but their ability to distinguish between enemy and friend completely disappears.
Okay, crew, let me jump in there. Let it play a little bit longer than what I was going to, but hey, it's Andrew Huberman. You got to let him talk, right? You got to let him talk. So what was really, really interesting is what he was talking about in regards to the third eye. We've all heard that before, right? You've got all your chakras and your third eye, and it sounds like we're going down a bit of spirituality with this meditation today. And I've done many other episodes like this in the past, so please Google or search on Spotify, iTunes. I don't know where you're listening to this, even on YouTube, right? So what you got to understand is that's science explaining the difference between the use of the pineal gland and the pituitary gland, and also what the prefrontal cortex. They all do different things, right? So what everyone talks about in the third eye, like he just said, is the pineal gland, right? Well, the pineal gland, obviously he was speaking what? In animals? Yes, it is like a retina. It is an eye. It literally processes light. But why? So we can sleep. That's it. We can wake up and we're not like a bear, right? Coming in hibernation. No, the melatonin is done in certain amounts so we can go to sleep and wake up. So that's not your third eye. So that's interesting, first of all, right? It's very interesting. But what I thought was really profound in what he just said is the prefrontal cortex. That's at the front in the images that people see as the third eye. But maybe that's not the pineal gland that everyone talks about, right? Where DMT, dimethoxytriptylate, is produced. And it is proven to do that. So he's got a different perspective on this. Hey, what do I know, right? People have been talking about this for thousands of years. It's even in the Vatican in Rome, right? There's all these statues, and it's all about the pine cone, and the pine cone is supposed to be the pineal gland, right? So, and that's where they've done so many studies. And so this is an interesting concept, right? But how does this help you? How does this help you? Well, what he's talking about next is what he was talking about was if your prefrontal cortex, or the part of your brain that makes decisions, and it also has, it's like the CEO of the brain. It tries to organize and put rational thought into what is happening, rather than in your limbic system, which is the emotional system, right? So when we understand that, then what happens with trauma, for example, in trauma as a kid, or if you've partied too much when you were young, what it is, we have underdeveloped prefrontal cortexes. So that means it's like what do the army do, right? The army try and get you in at 18. Why? Because in a man or a boy or a male, the prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed till you're, I think it's 21 or even later 25 or something like that, right? I'd have to look at the stats. But so because you don't have that rational thinking, it means you are very emotionally reactive, or unemotionally reactive, meaning you don't have the empathy there. So that's what he's talking about with computer games, right? You can just shoot and kill, and you're not thinking, you're just shooting and killing. Do you think that might be good in the military for people? Yeah, right. So they know what they're doing. And if you can brainwash, I was going to say, but it's kind of what I do for entrepreneurs to perform at the highest level. The military do it to make assassins. It's the same thing. I just do it in an ethical way, right? So what's interesting is you've had damage to that prefrontal cortex, or you are traumatized still, and we haven't dealt with those past traumas. Then what happens is you don't have that regulation the same way. So you might find yourself being very volatile. Sound familiar? You might find yourself being very reactive. And so what we have to do is we have to really train our conscious part of our mind. The conscious part of your mind is the bit of the mind that you're listening to this. And if I say, wiggle your left little finger, wiggle your left small finger, wiggle it, right? You're consciously aware now of that finger. That's the conscious mind. So we have to bring up these old patterns of behavior, so then we can make rational decisions using the cortex, and that means then we're not going to be in the same reactive space, right? So does that make sense? I hope that makes sense, because this is where we really go into understanding to reach that next level of business or success, or to get out the dip that you're in now. The old programs in your brain are generally playing. Why? Because I call them like a brain muscle, a mind muscle, right? And that mind muscle gets pumped. It gets pumped and built. And if you've had incidences, it doesn't have to be in your childhood, by the way, right? It can be one of the biggest ones with me was when I was putting that project together to build a resort in Fiji when I was 27. And my business partner stole all my money, sent me into bankruptcy, went through a nervous breakdown. I'm very young, right? And that was because I trusted implicitly this guy, and he mentored me. He was much older than me, but he also damaged me. And so there's been trauma there that I've had to really work on clearing. And you could talk about it all day long in therapy. You could. But what are you doing? You're reliving the past. And if you relive the past, that is what becomes your dominant focus, right? Because that's what the brain does. Whatever pattern you repeat becomes more and more and more and more and more and more. And it's not what we want. So when we have been ripped off by business partners, or you feel yourself repeating the same behavior inside of a business model, right? Maybe you keep getting stressed, you keep distracting yourself, you're forcing yourself by pretending to be a top performer again. And the truth is, yeah, it's very messy in there, and we need to clear that up. But once we're free of that, or you've got the techniques and I've done the stuff with your brain, then what happens is you suddenly soar, because you can see a different version of you is the dominant one, and that different version of you sees the world a different way. So now we're playing a different program, right? So the way we move between the old and the new, letting some secrets out now, the old and the new, is by using or understanding how to use this decision-making part of your brain through questions. Questions are what? Well, we are question-answering machines. That's what we are. So if we're question-answering machines, then we need to ask the right questions, right? And that directs our focus. It directs our which neurology or mind muscle version of us that we're lighting up. And from there, we have different behaviors. Probably want to rewind that one, right? But hopefully that helped. But definitely rewind and have a little listen. Let's go back to Andrew.
So they become a highly effective motor, or I should say sensory motor machine, but their assessment and their judgment about right or wrong completely disappears. This is also true for people that have prefrontal damage. They often will have inappropriate behavior or a hard time suppressing behaviors, etc. So the third eye center as the seat of consciousness and our intention is something that makes sense generally with what we know about the neuroscience and neurology. But there's something more to it that I think is especially important for all of you that goes beyond anything about ancient traditions or pineals or birds or snakes and pits in the top of the head. And here's what it is. The brain itself, meaning the brain tissue, does not have any sensory neurons. What do I mean by that? Well, if I touch the top of my hand, I can feel that. If I want to sense my heartbeat, if I work at it, I can feel that. If I want to sense how I feel internally, at the level of my stomach, is it full, is it empty, am I hungry, is it acidic, does it ache, or does it feel pleasant, etc. I can sense that. And that's because we have sensory neurons on our skin and in our body, etc. We also have sensory neurons in our eyes that let us perceive things externally. We have no sensory neurons on our brain. This is one of the reasons why you can remove the skull and do brain surgery on somebody who's wide awake and be poking around in there, and they don't need any anesthetic on the brain itself. They need anesthetic for the incision site, but they don't need anesthetic on the brain because it has no feeling. You have emotions, but there's no feeling. So normally we are perceiving and paying attention to what we are sensing, either externally, sights and sounds, again, exteroception, or internally, interoception, touch, etc. But by focusing our perception and our attention not on our bodily surface like a body scan, but to a point a couple centimeters or inches behind our forehead, we essentially are bringing that attentional, that perceptual spotlight to a location in which there is no sensation. There's nothing to feel there. And when we do that by closing our eyes and focusing on that quote unquote third eye center, which is the prefrontal cortex, to be quite honest, when we do that, something else happens. And what happens is when we are not thinking about and perceiving our sensations, because there are none there, our thoughts and our emotions and our memories sort of mushroom up. A better way to put it would be that they geyser up and take on more prominence in our perception. What I mean by this is that normally, I'm not thinking about the contact point between me and this chair, but as I'm speaking, I'm in contact with the chair and those neurons are firing. But if I focus my energy and attention on them, they're going to fire the same, but more of my perception goes there. Similarly, I'm thinking things all the time, you are too, and I'm perceiving things all the time, and I'm remembering things all the time, and I'm anticipating things all the time about the future. But by focusing my attention on the one organ for which I have no sensation, that is my brain, well then, thoughts, feelings, and memories, feelings meaning emotional feelings, start to grow in their prominence, in my awareness and in my perception. And so this is why when you sit down to a meditative practice, if it's a meditative practice where you close your eyes or you're focused on that third eye center, where you're focused on your brain as opposed to your bodily surface or something external to you, the thoughts seem to come by in waves and they can almost be overwhelming. It's very hard to, as it's often described, just sit back and watch your thoughts go by because there are so many of them.
Love this, right? So, first of all, when I do closed eye processes, people can call it hypnosis, and that's what I've got qualifications in. And hypnosis is different to guided meditation, by the way, and people don't really get that. It's guided meditation is you being in an altered brainwave, right? Which is the same as hypnosis, right? But it's also guided, meaning it's just a conversation generally, right? Hypnosis is way deeper, and hypnosis is in neuro-linguistic programming. It's in NLP. It's a modality inside of NLP. We use it to change the images in your brain. You can also use it for persuasion and influence, right? You can also use it for peak states. You can also use it, that's what I do with everything, right? You can use it for marketing. You can use it for all of this different stuff. But what I want you to understand is that when we close our eyes, right, what we're doing there is we're changing brainwave frequency, which gives us access to that software or the images, right? Or the autonomic nervous system. The bits of your brain that's, the images and the thoughts that just pop up, well, we've got access to them, right? So when we close our eyes, we're switching off the external visual side. And what we're doing is then we can, like he's saying, we can have a little look at the images. And then we can play with them. We can play with these images. We can change them malleable, right? Not talking about neuroplasticity, I'm talking about the actual structure of the images. So you can change the feeling of a past, or you can change the feeling of a future. You can change the feeling of the next thing that you're about to do that's creating nervousness, right? You can adjust that. Because if you're focusing on something that you did wrong or something that happened to you in the past, and then you start thinking about the future, that creates a neural net, a wiring connecting those old to the new. That's not what we want, man. It's not what we want. What we want is to be able to go way deeper into that memory, pull out the good bits, and then build them into what we call an anchor, right? Or a place that we can then wire to the future version of us, to a future scenario very cleanly. Now, this might sound a little technical, and it is. It's very complex from my side, but it's very easy for the client because all they're doing is shutting their eyes and listening to me, right? But the other thing is with the hypnotic language, not guided meditation, hypnotic language, there are certain ways to communicate with the unconscious mind or your brain at a much higher level, right? So it remembers certain things, it imagines clearer, it understands what it wants you want it to focus on much more clearly. That's much more than a guided meditation, right? But most people out there don't know the difference. Hypnosis is kind of a dirty word because people don't understand it, and that's the difference that makes the difference. Makes the difference between someone becoming a world champion or becoming ninth, right? Both highly skilled, but what's the difference, right? How they are able to do micro decisions in the moment, and the micro decisions in the moment are what? Well, because of the pre-conditioned or pre-trained brain or that software, right? So when you can understand that, is this mindset or is this highly skilled, a completely different thing? Completely different, right? Is this like you've heard other coaches talk about? Or is this a different thing, right? There's levels, there's white belts, there's black belts, there's all these different things, right? So when I show you these type of things, and over the last few episodes, I showed you a little bit more, some of the trainings that I do, and it's just a little glimpse into them, but I want you to understand the level of difference. And the level of difference is the results. It's purely results, right? These people haven't worked with me for no reason. I create results. And that unfortunately is few and far between in the coaching industry these days. That's why I am really an advisor. Depends on what I'm doing, right? But I'm an advisor to high net worth individuals, founders, and high performers, right? And one of the things that I do now is, and now I've created a reboot protocol. That reboot protocol enables top performers to consistently be at their best day after day after day after day after day. And that's the difference, right? So when we look at what Andrew's talking about today, it kind of takes the spirituality away from it, which I'm a big person on energy. I'm a big person on the spiritual side, but I also love science. I also love a different way of seeing the world. Whether we're talking about quantum physics, we're talking about frequency, we're talking about neuroscience or neuro-linguistic programming or behavioral change, right? Behavioral psychology. It's all the same thing to me. It's making badasses. And if we can make you a badass again or make you a badass now, then it's a game changer, man. Does this make sense? I hope so.
Actually, the best way to stop thinking is to really focus on something external or to focus on sensation. That's less thinking than it is perceiving senses. Okay, so I don't want this to get too abstract. When people talk about the third eye center, they're not talking about the pineal, they're talking about prefrontal cortex. And when you direct your own attention to the very area of your brain that directs attention, there's nothing to sense there. The only things that will become present to you are feelings, emotions, that is, thoughts, and memories. And they will often arrive in what seems to be a very disorganized fashion. And the reason they arrive in somewhat disorganized fashion is because normally we just don't perceive things that way. Normally we are splitting our attention, our perception that is, to multiple things, our sensation and our thoughts. When we put all of our perception into our thoughts, we see how disorganized, how wandering they are, and how random and intrusive those can be. Again, random and intrusive. And much of what we talked about in that paper earlier, the one where they asked people, what are you doing and what are you feeling and how happy or how unhappy you are? What they discovered was that most people are sort of in their head a lot. They're not really present to what they're doing, which leads me to the statement that I believe, at least based on the data, that paper included, that most people have an interoceptive bias. They're focused more on what's going on internally than they are focused on what's happening externally. There are certainly people who, for the opposite is true, but I think that this is an issue because we hear so often about the need to do a meditation practice that allows us to focus inward and that we're getting yanked around by all the stressors of life, et cetera, et cetera. And we're getting yanked around by all the stressors and demands of life. But as we do that, we tend to be very focused on what's happening with us. The data clearly point to the fact that being mindful and being aware can enhance one's level of presence and happiness. But we can go so far as to say that being mindful and aware of what's happening, not just with us, but external to us in our immediate environment, that includes what other people are saying and doing, that also can really enhance our sense of well-being and happiness. At least that's what the data point to.
Boom. Love it. Right? So what he's talking about is two different things, right? We're talking about what I was talking about anyway was retraining the brain and teaching you a little bit of how that works. What he's talking about is the dismissing the understanding from a neuroscience perspective around what the third eye really is, right? We know it's the what? Yeah, the prefrontal cortex now. And what else do we know? We know if we switch that off or it's damaged, we have regulation issues, emotional regulation issues. What else do we know? We know that meditation takes us inside, right? And what he's talking about is presence from the data is also created externally. So look at it this way, right? And I agree with both of those things and everything he's saying. And also it's having the ability to recognize or have awareness around what you need in that moment. Because if your mind's really, really busy, then awesome. You could focus on your breath, you can focus on the imagery, you can focus on whatever it is to start calming that down. But it's like going for a walk, right? You might go for a walk one day and you're seeing the wind hit the leaves, you're seeing the texture of the bark on the trees, you're seeing the cobbles on the street, you get the idea, right? You hear the noises of the birds, and it's the same road you've walked down, but yesterday you walked down and you didn't notice any of it because you were so caught up in your head. So it's about understanding using many different modalities to get what you want. And what we want is presence. What we want is that skill to be able to calm our nervous system, our brain, and shut off, right? So we can really have expanded awareness around the situation, because that means we're not thinking about the future and the past, future and the past, future and the past, future and the past. What we're doing is allowing space so we can interrupt the behavior, interrupt the pattern, interrupt the synapse connections. We can also open up to different parts of our brain so we can access the creative side of us. There's so many benefits, right? There's so many benefits to being able to shift from the old to the new, from the external to internal, and this helps us with business so much. But the underlying point to all of this is that if we don't treat ourselves like professional athletes, and professional athletes, when they're in a dip, what do? They instantly go to a coach. It's not even a thought, right? That's what they do. But in the entrepreneur world, for some bizarre reason, marketers have taught people that's not what you do. Marketers have taught them, and maybe they taught you to go and pay more marketers to get another skill set, and that's going to fix your business. Well, it is, but it's also not. And I've gone through all that before, so you need to re-listen to this episode maybe again. But I think that's it. Let's wrap this up today. It's the end of episode 418, and I hope you got lots of things from it. I'd love you to do a few things for me. I'll give you all of this, right? That's my love for you, right? But I want you to really go and get a review. Do a little review for me. iTunes and Spotify, it's so easy. Please go and write me a review. 5 stars if you loved it. That'd be even better. It means more people can hear this podcast, and it means I can help more people. If it's helped you, it can help others. And what else? Make sure that you are heading over to andymurphy.online. We're going to have some blogs coming up there, which is going to be some cool articles. Make sure that you're logging in. Well, you can log in if you want, but you're going to go and get the Mind Control Handbook. I think Total Mind Control Handbook. I think that's a golden thing for you to get. Why? Because I can also share these articles and things that I write on through email, because I want you on that. I've got some cool things. The other thing is, you can definitely check the 8-Figure Thinker out, or you can check the Genius Trader out. Got some other things coming up in the shop on andymurphy.online. What else? Well, if you're used to being in top performance and you have had that bubble pop like I was explaining, and you're finding it difficult to find that fire again, then I'm your man. Okay, I switch it on so fast, whether it's coming into the VIP, which is over 12 weeks, or we can do it in 1 day, 2 days, 90 days, or 12 months. But either way, it's going to be life-changing. Sound good? So if you need a reboot, you know where to find me. Head over to andymurphy.online and click on Work With Me. Fill the application form in. Let's just have a chat. If it's for you, it's for you. It's not, you're not. But either way, we leave as friends. Sound good? Awesome. andymurphy.online. Until the next time, keep kicking ass. Much love. And, one more thing. Why don't you smile for me?
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode of the Mindset by Design podcast with your host and NLP expert, Andy Murphy. We'll catch you next time.